No one wants to be forgotten. We want to be remembered, even if the desire is futile, giving us only a fleeting sense of immortality and eternal connection to Earth. It has nonetheless always been important to us. Memory ensures survival. It is the foundation of our culture and identity, and the desire to avoid oblivion has shaped human culture, from monumental architecture to digital legacies. For some, then, to not be remembered is a fate worse than death. Death, being inevitable, cannot create the doubt that the fear of dying forgotten brings. The last of a bloodline, the end of the road. No one left alive to remember your name, who you were, or why you mattered. This is perhaps why the act of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, intentionally obliterated, has been such a prevalent form of posthumous punishment throughout human history. Evidence goes as far back as ancient Mesopotamia, 5,000 years ago, and has been seen in most every prominent civilization since. A fate usually reserved for the condemned political elite, statues defaced, coins melted down, names chiseled off inscriptions and erased from public record. 35 Roman emperors fell victim to this erasure. Usually, the Senate would pass formal sanctions against the memory of the person to be forgotten, decreeing that all their images and records be destroyed. One of the most famous instances, Gaeta murdered by his brother Caracalla. Perhaps the most notable joint emperors, their rule was a failure. Incapable of sharing power, Caracalla plotted to kill his younger brother, eventually succeeding with Gaeta murdered in the arms of his mother by Caracalla's centurions. The now lone emperor subsequently ordered damnatio memoriae upon his deceased younger brother, with much of Gaeta's physical legacy erased. However, coins with Gaeta's image lasted. Damnatio memoriae was not often carried out successfully. Take Caligula too. The Senate tried to have his memory condemned, but this didn't work because in ancient Rome popular opinion played an important part in deciding who to punish. Ironically, the statues of the disgraced emperor have survived better than those of the good emperors, as they were stored and therefore better preserved, away from the elements. Most scholars agree that complete damnatio memoriae is more or less impossible. Iconoclastic vandalism only makes martyrs of the dishonored, ensuring that they will be remembered for all time. The most notable, iconic, memorable Roman emperors are the bad ones. Nero, Caligula, Commodus were all condemned to be forgotten and are remembered all the more for it. Guy Boehner further argues that rather than being to erase people from history, the purpose of damnatio memoriae was to guarantee that its victims were remembered negatively. The topic of forgotten, disgraced, cancelled historical figures has been difficult for us to study. Any truly successful damnatio memoriae would leave us entirely unaware of the dishonored's existence. Perhaps the very worst people in history will never be known. The practice still exists all the way into the 20th and 21st century. Joseph Stalin employed a quite sinister and thorough campaign of damnatio memoriae through propaganda, historical revisionism, and photo manipulation in an attempt to consolidate his power and emphasize himself as Lenin's rightful successor. Stalin's Great Purge was just that. Nothing that contradicted him survived. He systematically eliminated perceived threats, whether they were people, works of literature, history, art, or cinema. Nikolai Yezhov, head of the NKVD from 1936 to 1938, who orchestrated much of Stalin's groundwork in ridding the Soviet Union of its enemies through interrogation, torture, and execution, himself fell victim to Stalin's totalitarian control over truth itself. Executed in 1940, after falling out of favor with the Soviet leader, Yezhov was famously airbrushed out of photographs alongside Stalin, though, in another ironic twist, after his death in 1953, de-Stalinization began. His rise and fall in the realm of memory highlights the universal struggle over who gets to define history and how societies use erasure to define and redefine their values. In the wake of the George Floyd protests in 2020, a wave of statue removals swept across the West, targeting monuments to figures associated with colonialism, slavery, and systemic racism. These acts serve as a modern parallel to damnatio memoriae, the deliberate erasure of historical figures whose physical presence is no longer welcome in contemporary society, whose ideologies are deemed unacceptable by contemporary values. Though the statues of Edward Colston, Christopher Columbus, George Washington were pulled down and defaced, their memory will inevitably endure. Pulling down statues is, in fact, something of an American tradition. Days after declaring independence from Britain in 1776, General George Washington and his troops tore down a statue of King George III in Bowling Green, Philadelphia. We are constantly and have always been rewriting history, deciding who should be remembered and who should be forgotten, and then changing our minds 2 centuries later. After the fall of empires, the end of regimes, or simply with the changing of societal ideals, erasing history is reframing history, a rejection of the values that a person's memory represents. Damnatio memoriae, or modern cancel culture, actually preserves the histories it seeks to challenge in a new and critical context. It is impossible now, however. Proliferation of information, imagery, and identity on the internet ensures that almost every trace of a person's existence is captured and stored. No one can be forgotten. In this age of digital permanence, our desires have maybe changed. The challenge now is to escape from a world where nothing is ever truly forgotten. Anonymity and the ability to be forgotten have become a new kind of freedom, the desire for this clashing with our instinctual fear of oblivion.